For over 40 years, the work of Stephen King has become an important part of pop culture. If it's film, television, or even comic books, the legendary writer is known for his amazing stories and timeless adventures. For this video, we will be diving into the best film adaptations. From remakes to reimaginings. There will be no cinematic venture left ignored. Though, let's start off with this. We will be taking into consideration how well the film adapts the source material. That means The Shining will not rank that high. With that out of the way, let's dive into Stephen King's best movie adaptations. Number 10. 1408. One of the most underrated Stephen King adaptations, 1408 is a little film from the late 2000s that is a must-see. Based on one of King's short stories, 1408 follows a skeptical author as he stays in a haunted hotel room for his latest book and gets way more than he bargained for. Haunted hotels in Stephen King's standards are nothing new, but something about this film felt so fresh compared to all of the others. John Cusack and Samuel L. Jackson put in stellar performances, making a case for why both of these men should do more work in the horror genre. The scares are plentiful and gave more tense moments than some of its peers at the time. 2017 is filled with some of the most extreme gore, so a classic Stephen King ghost story stands out among the pack. While ghost and haunted places are a tiresome trend by now, 1408 helped set a modern trend for the genre and become one of Stephen King's best adaptations. Number 9. The Dead Zone. No, this isn't the hit show that was on television for a few seasons. Number 9 goes to a great 80s film called The Dead Zone. Starring the always amazing Christopher Walken as Johnny Smith, a man who receives psychic powers after waking up from a coma, this movie has just the right amount of insane and well-made qualities. Horror fans will love to know this is produced by Halloween co-creator Deborah Hill. It's adapting the work of Stephen King and crafted by body horror expert David Cronenberg. What an all-star scary lineup. Stephen King reportedly told David Cronenberg that the changes the writer and director made, quote, improved and intensified the power of the narrative. High praise from a man who is notoriously tough on his adaptations, more on that in a moment. But Stephen King is right, the film is a step above the source material in a bizarre can't-miss romp. Number 8. The Mist. The Mist is a damn good film, something that expands on the source material of Stephen King but adds so much more of its own flavor. That's actually key to making one of these adaptations work, finding the balance between the original material and your own vision. The Mist walks that line ever so sweetly and then takes a dramatic jump at the end in one of horror's most shocking endings of all time. Although it's nothing like the ending in the Stephen King story, the final moments of this film will stay with you for quite some time. If you want an even better experience with this movie, watch it in black and white as the filmmakers originally intended. It's a stunning piece of cinema that harks back to the days of classic 1950s horror movies. We will see director Frank Darabont on this list again, but I will go as far as saying this is one of his best films. Number 7. Carrie. The first adaptation and still one of the best novels to films for Stephen King, Carrie is a Brian De Palma masterpiece and another iconic director to adapt Stephen King. This 70s classic has so much style but just as much substance, which is again key to adapting Stephen King's work. Carrie is an important story about a bullied and abused girl getting revenge on those who have wronged her, something unheard of at the time and still strikingly original now. There is now over 100 adaptations of Stephen King's work, and this is the very first one, a trend started by De Palma seeing something in a young creative writer. This is a 2-time Academy Award nominee. The film is not just a great adaptation, but a really great piece of cinema. While 2 other attempts on this material have been tried, neither come close to capturing what Sissy Spacek, Brian De Palma, and Stephen King do when they're together. Number 6. The Shining. If we were making this list purely on the film alone, The Shining is easily in the top spot, but when it comes to adapting the work and bringing to life Stephen King, The Shining is a little bit harder to rank. If you ever want to see 2 creatives interpreting the same material very differently, look at The Shining film created by Stanley Kubrick and then read the novel by Stephen King. So different in their tones and styles, but both equally amazing in their own right. Stephen King went on record to say that this film is a big, beautiful Cadillac with no real engine on the inside, even going as far as criticizing the way Wendy is handled in the film and Jack Torrance's lack of an arc. While those are valid points, there is still no denying the sheer brilliance that's on display in this film. Everything is made with such meticulous care that it shows how hard everyone worked on screen. Number 5. The Green Mile. Stephen King isn't just a horror writer, and The Green Mile proves that with a great novel and an even better film. Frank Darabont makes another appearance on this list with his 1999 film based on the 1996 novel of the same name. A critical and box office success, on paper, The Green Mile is one of the most impressive films on the King novel-to-movie roster. Take Tom Hanks in his prime with the late Michael Clarke Duncan and add in a solid story, and you have actual magic on your hands. The work of Stephen King usually makes for some good prestige films. Just about half of this list has Oscar nominations, but The Green Mile is just one of those special cases. Thankfully, the movie does hold up today with only a few moments not aging well, and that's no fault on the creators or the actors. This is another must-see entry for anyone to expand their selections of Stephen King adaptations. Number 4, Stand By Me. Another not-so-horror entry on this list. Stand By Me is pure 80s movie gold. Perfectly capturing youth in a timeless way, this is one of the best coming-of-age stories ever, and a seriously great film by Rob Reiner. Stand By Me features a stellar cast that includes Will Wheaton, the late River Phoenix, Jerry O'Connell, and the 80s staple Corey Feldman. If that doesn't sell you on the film alone, I don't know what will. If going by Stephen King's word, this is what he considers the first successful film to capture his work. Famed critic Gene Siskel recalls a story where Stephen King was so moved by the film during a private screening that he had to leave for 15 minutes to compose himself. This list isn't all about going off the word of Stephen King, but that type of reaction is undeniable and speaks to the film's greatness. Number 3, Misery. Honestly, Kathy Bates helps turn one of Stephen King's most iconic works into one of the best film adaptations. Yes, another appearance by Rob Reiner does help, but I can spend a full 2 minutes just talking about the brilliance of Bates in this film. She took home the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress for her work here, and it is well deserved. Yes, Stephen King created a great character here, but it was wonderfully brought to life by Rob Reiner and Kathy Bates. Stephen King lists this as one of his favorite adaptations of all time, and talked about the real personal nature of this film. It's crazy to think in the 80s that a story of a writer dealing with an obsessed fan struck such a chord, and it rings even more true in the age of stan culture and social media. Number 2, It Chapter 1 and It Chapter 2. One of the most successful R-rated movies of all time, the highest grossing horror movie, and one of Stephen King's best adaptations. It Chapter 1 is a true beauty to behold. The movie rocked the horror genre and mainstream audiences with its violence, fun tone, and even better performances. While the 90s miniseries starring Tim Curry is fun in its own right, nothing can compare to this cinematic journey. Bill Skarsgård as Pennywise, the clown facing off with the Losers Club, is quite possibly one of the best horror performances of all time. And then you add in the striking and powerful conclusion to the story with It Chapter 2, and you have a complete experience. This video was even delayed a little bit just so I can include the second entry on this list. The horror genre rarely sees epics on the scale of Chapter 2, and it proves to be one of Stephen King's best adaptations. Also, I give points to director Andy Muschietti for taking the weirdest of Stephen King's works and adapting it in all its perfectness. Number 1, Maximum Overdrive. Just kidding. Number 1, The Shawshank Redemption. The third movie from Frank Darabont on this list, and one of his best works ever. Nominated for 7 Academy Awards, this is one of the most well-received Stephen King adaptations of all time. While it's not a box office success, The Shawshank Redemption was a hit with critics and fans. Everything about this film and the story of hope, compassion, and the human spirit grips you from beginning and never lets you go. All of Stephen King's best works do that, and The Shawshank Redemption is no exception. While this is not a real determining factor on this list, Stephen King does credit this as his favorite novel-to-film adaptation, and it's rightfully so. With the amount of work that went in to make this film, the acclaim it received, and all the actual love for the source material, this is no doubt the best Stephen King adaptation of all time. No other film has impacted film as a whole and pop culture quite like The Shawshank Redemption has. What did you think of this list of the best Stephen King adaptations? Do you believe The Shining should be higher? Do you agree with Shawshank Redemption in the top spot? Let us know all your feelings in the comments below. Make sure you subscribe to Flickering Myth, because we make videos like this every single week, and give us a thumbs up because YouTube takes those way too seriously. Alright everyone, and let's talk about Stephen King adaptations below.